The morphine drip had stopped working an hour ago, but I didn't call for the nurse. Pain, I'd learned, could be useful. It kept me sharp, reminded me exactly why I was lying in this sterile white room, with tubes snaking from my arms like electronic ivy. I turned my head toward the window, watching autumn leaves spiral past the third-floor glass. Funny how death gives you such clarity about the small details. The way the afternoon light caught the dust motes. The rhythmic beeping of machines that had become my only companions. The fact that my phone hadn't buzzed in 6 hours. Not since he'd sent that text. Emergency with Lily. Back soon, soon, as if time meant anything when you're dying. My name is Eleanor Winters, and 3 days ago I was a successful marketing executive with a loving husband of 5 years and a future that stretched endlessly ahead. Today, I'm a 28-year-old woman with stage 4 complications from what should have been routine surgery, and I'm learning that love is often just another word for convenience. The door creaked open, and Dr. Patterson walked in with that carefully neutral expression doctors perfect when they're about to deliver bad news. Behind her, a younger resident clutched a tablet like a shield. "Mrs. Winters," she said, settling into the chair my husband had vacated 12 hours ago. "I'm afraid the infection has spread faster than we anticipated." I already knew. My body had been screaming it at me since midnight when the fever spiked and the world started swimming in and out of focus. But I let her continue, watching her face as she delivered the words that should have shattered me. "We've tried everything we can. The sepsis is aggressive. I'm sorry, but we're looking at hours, not days." Hours. I absorbed this information with the same calm I'd once used to process quarterly reports. Behind the doctor, the resident looked uncomfortable, probably wondering where my husband was, why I was receiving a death sentence alone. "I understand," I said quietly. "Thank you for everything you've done." Dr. Patterson seemed surprised by my composure. She'd probably expected tears, bargaining, the classic stages of grief compressed into a frantic final act. Instead, I was thinking about that text message, about how my husband had promised to be here, through sickness and health. But apparently, that clause had an escape hatch, labelled Lily Chen. Lily Chen. 24 years old, long black hair that she wore in artistic waves, a laugh like wind chimes that she deployed strategically in meetings. She was the new graphic designer at his architectural firm, hired 6 months ago when I was still healthy, still trusting, still believing that 5 years of marriage meant something. I'd noticed the change gradually, the way he started working late more often, how his phone became something he guarded, face down on restaurant tables, password protected with sudden urgency. The new cologne that smelled like vanilla and jasmine, nothing like the sandalwood he'd worn when we were dating. "Is there anyone we should call?" Dr. Patterson asked gently. "Family? Friends?" I almost laughed. My parents had died in a car accident 2 years ago. His parents lived in Seattle and barely tolerated me. I was never quite sophisticated enough for their architect son. Our friends were mostly couple friends, the kind who would awkwardly side with whoever kept their social circle intact. "My husband should be back soon," I lied smoothly. "He's just handling an emergency." The doctor nodded and left me with promises of pain management and comfort care. The resident lingered, clearly wanting to say something. "Mrs. Winters," she began hesitantly. "Sometimes it helps to write letters. For closure." After they left, I stared at the ceiling and let myself remember the last normal day. It was 3 weeks ago, a Saturday morning when I woke up with what I thought was food poisoning. David had been attentive then, bringing me tea and toast, his hand cool on my forehead. "Probably just that sushi place," he'd said, but his eyes had been distant, already thinking about something else. Someone else. By Monday, the pain had intensified, and by Wednesday, I was in surgery for what the doctors thought was appendicitis. but my appendix had been fine. The real problem was deeper, more insidious, an infection that had been hiding in my system, waiting for the right moment to spread like wildfire through my bloodstream. David had been there for the surgery, pacing the waiting room like a devoted husband. He'd held my hand when I woke up, his wedding ring asked cool against my palm. For a moment, I thought we might be okay, that this medical crisis would remind us what we meant to each other. Then came the complications, the fever that wouldn't break, the infection that laughed at every antibiotic they threw at it. And slowly, his visits became shorter. His phone calls to check on things at the office became longer. His excuses became more creative. Yesterday, she had called him while he was sitting right beside my bed. I watched his face transform when he saw her name on the screen, softening in a way it hadn't for me in months. "I have to take this," he had said, stepping into the hallway. Through the thin walls, I heard fragments. "Oh, can't just drop everything. And you know how I feel. And finally, I'll figure something out." When he came back, he was different, distracted, guilty. He kept checking his phone and jumping every time it buzzed. "Maybe you should go home and get some rest," I'd suggested, testing him. The relief on his face was answer enough. This morning, he'd arrived with coffee and apologies, explaining that Lily was having some kind of crisis with a client presentation. Important career stuff. As if my dying wasn't equally pressing. "You understand, right, Eleanor? This could make or break her portfolio review." I'd understood perfectly. I understood that Lily's career concerns outweighed my final hours. I understood that love could evaporate as quickly as morning dew when it was inconvenient. I understood that I was dying alone because my husband had found someone more alive. The afternoon faded into evening, and my phone remained silent. The nurses came and went, adjusting my medication, checking my vitals, speaking in those careful, gentle tones reserved for the dying. One of them, Maria, had kind eyes and steady hands. "Your husband will be back soon, sweetheart," she said, misreading my expression. "I'm sure he will," I replied, but we both knew it wasn't true. As the sun set outside my window, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that seemed almost violent in their beauty, I closed my eyes and felt something shift inside me. Not physically. That damage was irreversible. But something deeper in the place where hope lived. The pain was getting worse, spreading through my chest like spilled ink on paper. Each breath felt like drowning in slow motion. But beneath the physical agony, something else was growing. Something cold and sharp and absolutely certain. If I was going to die tonight, I would die knowing exactly who David really was. Not the man I'd married, who'd promised to love me through anything, but the man who chose convenience over commitment, who abandoned his dying wife for a girl young enough to still believe in fairy tales. The monitor beside my bed began beeping faster, its rhythm matching my racing heart. Not from fear. I'd moved past that hours ago. From anger, pure crystalline rage that felt cleaner than anything I'd experienced in weeks. I reached for the call button, then stopped. Let them discover me naturally. Let David come back to find an empty room and a lifetime of guilt. Let Lily Chen build her career on the foundation of a marriage she'd helped destroy. But as my vision began to blur and the room grew dim around the edges, I felt something impossible happening. The anger was transforming, hardening into something more useful than rage. It was becoming purpose. My last conscious thought was a promise. If there's any justice in this universe, I won't stay dead. And when I come back, I'll remember everything. The machines flatlined at 11:47 p.m., while my husband was across town, holding another woman's hand and promising her a future that should have been mine. But death, as I was about to learn, isn't always the ending. Sometimes it's just a new beginning. The first thing I noticed was the absence of pain. The second was the sunlight streaming through familiar windows. Not the harsh fluorescent lighting of the hospital, but the warm morning glow of our bedroom. My bedroom, where I'd woken up thousands of times before, but never after dying. I sat up slowly, my hands flying to my abdomen, where the surgical incisions should have been. Smooth skin, no bandages, no tubes, no lingering ache from the infection that had killed me. My reflection in the dresser mirror showed a woman who looked exactly like Eleanor Winters, but with eyes that held knowledge they shouldn't possess. The bedside clock read 7:23 a.m., October 15th. 3 weeks before my surgery, 3 weeks before everything went wrong. David emerged from the bathroom, toweling his hair, humming some tune I didn't recognise. He looked younger somehow, or maybe it was just that I was seeing him with different eyes. Eyes that knew what he would become. "Morning, beautiful," he said, bending to kiss my forehead. The same gesture that had once made my heart flutter now felt like a betrayal in advance. "You're up early." I studied his face carefully. This version of David still loved me, or at least believed he did. The guilt lines around his eyes hadn't formed yet. His phone lay casually on his nightstand. No password protection. No secretive behaviour. Lily Chen was still just a name on a company roster, not yet the woman who would steal my husband while I lay dying. "Just couldn't sleep," I said, surprised at how normal my voice sounded. Inside, my mind was racing, cataloguing everything I knew, everything I could prevent, everything I could turn to my advantage. David kissed me properly then, and I let him even though I could taste the future on his lips. The future where he would choose her over me, where he would abandon me in my darkest hour. But this David didn't know that yet, and I was going to use his ignorance against him. "I was thinking," I said as he got dressed for work, "maybe we should have dinner with that new designer you mentioned. Lily, wasn't it? I'd love to meet her." His response was telling. Just a slight hesitation as he buttoned his shirt, a flicker of something in his eyes. Even now, 3 weeks before their affair would begin, something was already stirring. "Sure," he said too casually. "I'll ask her if she's free this weekend." I smiled, filing away that reaction for later analysis. "Perfect. It's always good to get to know your colleagues' families, don't you think?" The word families hit its mark. David's hand paused on his tie, and I saw the first shadow of the guilt that would eventually consume him. Good, let him start feeling uncomfortable now. After he left for work, I sat in our kitchen and made a list. Not on paper, I wasn't stupid enough to leave evidence, but a mental catalogue of everything I needed to know, everyone I needed to watch, every detail that could be turned into a weapon. First, my health. The infection that had killed me had been building for weeks before the surgery, some kind of rare bacterial growth that doctors had missed in routine checkups. This time, I would demand more comprehensive testing. I would catch it early, survive, and be strong when David showed his true colours. Second, Lily Chen. I needed to understand her, study her weaknesses, learn what made her tick. Knowledge was power, and I intended to be very powerful indeed. Third, the evidence. In my previous life, I'd been too trusting, too focused on fighting for my marriage instead of documenting its destruction. This time, I would be collecting proof from day one. I called in sick to work, something I rarely did, which made it believable. Instead, I drove to David's firm, parking across the street with a clear view of the entrance. I wanted to see them together, study their interaction before I entered the picture. Lily Chen arrived at 9:15 a.m., and I understood immediately why David would fall for her. She moved like poetry, all flowing gestures and effortless grace. Her hair caught the morning light, and even from a distance, I could see the confidence in her stride. She was everything I wasn't. Young, artistic, uncomplicated by years of marriage and responsibility. But I also saw something else. The way she checked her reflection in the building's glass doors. The deliberate sway of her hips as she walked. The calculated smile she flashed at the security guard. This wasn't innocence, this was strategy. Interesting. I followed her routine for 3 days, learning her patterns. Coffee at Brew and Bean on Market Street every morning at 8:45. Lunch at various trendy spots downtown, usually alone, but sometimes with other young professionals from the firm. Evening art classes at the community college on Tuesdays and Thursdays. She was building a life, creating an image. The sophisticated young artist making her mark in the city. But there were cracks in the facade. The way she lingered outside expensive boutiques she couldn't afford. How she took selfies at upscale restaurants but only ordered salads. The phone calls she took in Chinese, her voice sharp with frustration. On Thursday evening, I enrolled in the same art class. Eleanor Winters, I introduced myself, extending my hand with a warm smile. I am David's wife, David Morrison, from Harrison & Associates. Recognition flickered in her eyes, followed by something that might have been calculation. Oh, David's mentioned you, she said, though I was certain he hadn't. I'm Lily. It's so nice to meet you. Her handshake was firm, confident. Up close, she was even more beautiful, with delicate features and skin that seemed to glow from within. But her eyes were older than her years, and there was an ambition there that reminded me of myself at her age. David speaks very highly of your work, I said. He's quite impressed with your portfolio. A faint blush coloured her cheeks. He's been very supportive. It means a lot to have someone with his experience take an interest. There it was, the seed of what would become their affair. She was already thinking of him as more than just a supervisor, already seeing him as someone who could advance her career, her life, and David, flattered by the attention of a beautiful young woman, would mistake her professional interest for personal attraction. But I could see what he couldn't. This wasn't love waiting to bloom. This was opportunity, seeking advantage. Over the next 2 weeks, I cultivated Lily carefully. We became friendly, bonding over our shared art class and what she believed was my genuine interest in helping her career. I invited her to lunch, listened to her talk about her dreams of opening her own design studio, her frustration with the male-dominated architecture world. Sometimes I wonder if I'll ever be taken seriously, she confided over sushi, at an expensive restaurant I'd deliberately chosen. Somewhere she'd want to go, but couldn't afford. Men like David, they have it so easy. Established, respected, financially secure. David worked very hard to get where he is, I said mildly, watching her face. Of course, she backtracked quickly. I didn't mean to imply. I just meant that it must be nice to have that stability, to not have to worry about impressing people just to survive. She was fishing, testing how much I knew about David's finances, our lifestyle. I filed that away with everything else I was learning about Lily Chen. Meanwhile, I was building my insurance policy. I installed tracking software on David's phone and laptop, disguised as a security update. I set up a separate email account and began forwarding important documents, financial records, insurance policies, anything that might become relevant later. Most importantly, I scheduled comprehensive medical testing. When Dr. Reeves, my primary physician, expressed surprise at my sudden health anxiety, I smiled and said I'd been having some unusual symptoms. Better safe than sorry. The tests revealed what I'd expected, the early stages of the bacterial infection that would have killed me. This time, caught early, it was easily treatable with a targeted antibiotic regimen. I would live, I would be strong, and I would be ready. On November 1st, exactly when it had happened in my previous life, Lily made her move. David came home late, claiming he'd been helping a colleague with a project. But I could smell her perfume on his jacket, that vanilla and jasmine scent that would have become so familiar. His phone buzzed with a text from LC that he deleted without reading, or so he thought. Thanks to my tracking software, I saw everything. Thank you for staying late to help me. You're amazing. I said nothing, just smiled and asked how his day had been, watching him lie to my face with practiced ease. This David was further along than I'd expected. The emotional affair had already begun. Perfect. Now I could begin the real work. The affair progressed exactly as I remembered, but this time I was the puppet master watching the strings. November became a month of careful orchestration. While David and Lily believed they were conducting a secret romance, I was documenting every stolen moment, every lie, every betrayal. The tracking software captured their text messages, their phone calls, even their location data when they met for their clandestine lunches. But I needed more than digital evidence. I needed them to expose themselves publicly, completely, in a way that would destroy them both professionally and personally. My opportunity came when David mentioned the firm's annual holiday party in December. Every year, Harrison and Associates threw an elaborate celebration for clients and employees, the kind of high-profile event where careers were made or destroyed. Will you be inviting any of the newer employees? I asked innocently over dinner, watching David's fork pause halfway to his mouth. Probably. Why? Just thinking it would be nice to include everyone. That sweet girl Lily, for instance. She seemed so eager to make a good impression. The way he said her name told me everything. There was a tenderness there now, a protective quality that had once been reserved for me. I'm sure she'll be invited, he said carefully. Over the following weeks, I played my role perfectly. The loving, supportive wife who encouraged David to mentor promising young designers. I even suggested he take Lily to the Morrison Gallery opening, a professional development opportunity, I called it, since she was so interested in visual arts. Are you sure? He asked, and I could see the war in his eyes between guilt and desire. Of course, it's important to invest in talented people. The night of the gallery opening, I followed them. Not physically, that would have been too risky, but through David's phone GPS and the sophisticated camera system I'd installed in his car during one of his late nights at work. I watched them together in real time, seeing what I'd missed in my previous life because I'd been too trusting to look. The way Lily touched his arm while discussing paintings. How David's hand lingered on her lower back as he guided her through the crowded gallery. The moment they shared wine on the terrace, their faces inches apart, both knowing they were crossing a line but unable to stop themselves. They didn't kiss that night, but they might as well have. The emotional betrayal was complete. The next morning, David was different. Distracted, guilty, but also energized in a way I hadn't seen in months. He kept checking his phone, smiling at messages he thought I couldn't see. Good opening last night? I asked over coffee. Very successful. Lily has a real eye for design. I'm sure she does. That afternoon, I had lunch with Lily at her favourite cafe. She was glowing, radiating the kind of happiness that comes from believing you're in love with someone who can change your life. David's been so helpful with my career development, she said, unable to keep the smile from her voice. He's teaching me so much about client relations. He's very knowledgeable, I agreed. Sometimes I think he cares more about his work than anything else. I let that seed of doubt plant itself. Lily's smile faltered slightly as she considered the implications. I am sure he's dedicated to his family too, she said, but there was a question in her voice. Oh, absolutely. Though lately he's been working such long hours. Some nights I barely see him. Another seed. I watched Lily process this information, seeing her wonder if David's attention to her was just professional courtesy or something more. The beauty of psychological manipulation is that once you plant doubt, the target does most of the work themselves. 2 days later, David came home with a story about needing to work late on a major presentation. I knew from his calendar that he was actually taking Lily to dinner at Chez Laurent. the same restaurant where he'd proposed to me 5 years ago. "That's fine," I said, kissing his cheek. "I'll probably just stay in and catch up on some reading." Instead, I drove to Chez Laurent and requested a table near the back, where I could observe without being seen. I'd made a reservation under my maiden name, explaining to the hostess that I was surprising a friend. Watching them together was like viewing my own funeral. David was animated, engaged in a way he hadn't been with me in months. Lily was radiant, hanging on his every word. They were discussing her 5-year plan, which apparently included a lot of travel and creative freedom. "I've always wanted to see Europe," she said, her eyes bright with possibility. "Paris, especially. The architecture there must be incredible." "We should go," David said, and I watched my husband offer another woman the trip he'd been promising me for 3 years. They held hands across the table. They shared dessert. When David paid the check, Lily's fingers lingered on his wrist, and I saw the exact moment they both decided to stop pretending this was just professional mentorship. But I also saw something else. Something I'd missed in my first life because I'd been too devastated to analyse their dynamic objectively. Lily was performing. Don't misunderstand, she was attracted to David, certainly. But there was a calculated quality to her responses, a way she timed her laughter and adjusted her expressions that spoke of strategy rather than spontaneous emotion. She was playing a role, the enchanted younger woman swept off her feet by an accomplished older man. This wasn't just an affair. This was a career move. Over the next week, I confirmed my suspicions through careful observation and social media research. Lily Chen wasn't just a struggling designer trying to make her mark. She was drowning in student debt, behind on rent, with a family back in Seattle who expected her to send money she didn't have. More importantly, she'd done this before. Her LinkedIn profile, when cross-referenced with employment records I obtained through a private investigator, revealed a pattern. 3 previous jobs in 3 different cities, each one ending abruptly after she'd formed close mentoring relationships with married supervisors. In Portland, she'd left Reynolds Design after 6 months when the senior partner's wife discovered inappropriate text messages. In Phoenix, she'd been quietly transferred from the main office after rumours surfaced about her relationship with the department head. In Denver, she'd resigned suddenly from Mitchell & Associates, following what the company described as policy violations regarding professional boundaries. Lily Chen was a professional homewrecker, and David was just her latest mark. This changed everything. In my previous life, I'd viewed her as a young woman who'd fallen in love with the wrong man. Now I understood she was a predator who targeted my husband specifically because he represented financial security and professional advancement. The knowledge filled me with cold satisfaction. David wasn't just cheating on me, he was being systematically manipulated by someone who saw him as a stepping stone to a better life. I could use this. On December 10th, I put the final pieces of my plan into motion. I sent anonymous packages to David's business partners, Harrison and Associates' major clients, and several key figures in the city's architectural community. Each package contained carefully curated evidence: photographs of David and Lily at romantic dinners, printouts of their text conversations, financial records showing David was using company resources to pay for their dates. But most damaging of all were the documents I'd uncovered about Lily's past, including a police report from Denver where a wife had filed harassment charges against her before dropping them. I also sent a package to Mrs. Chen Lily's mother in Seattle. It included bank records showing that while Lily claimed poverty to extract money from her family, she was actually spending lavishly on clothes and dinners courtesy of her married boyfriend. The packages were scheduled to arrive on December 15th, the day of Harrison and Associates' holiday party. The party where David and Lily planned to announce their relationship to the office, having convinced themselves that their love was too pure to hide any longer. I spent the morning of December the 15th at the salon, getting my hair and makeup done. I chose a stunning red dress, the one David had bought me for our anniversary, but I'd never worn. Tonight, I would be absolutely radiant. Tonight, I would watch their world burn and I would smile while it happened. As I put on my jewellery, my phone buzzed with a text from David. Looking forward to tonight. Can't wait to dance with my beautiful wife. I smiled at my reflection. He had no idea how beautiful I was about to become, or how deadly. The Harrison and Associates holiday party was held at the Grand Ballroom of the Meridian Hotel, with crystal chandeliers casting diamonds of light across marble floors. I arrived fashionably late, my red dress turning heads as I glided through the crowd of architects, clients, and city officials. David spotted me immediately, his face lighting up with genuine appreciation. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for him. He still believed he was married to the trusting, naive woman who died in that hospital bed. "You look incredible," he whispered, kissing my cheek as photographers captured the moment for the firm's social media. "Thank you, darling." I smiled, scanning the room until I found her. Lily stood near the bar in a black cocktail dress that hugged every curve, her hair swept up in an elegant chignon. She was beautiful, confident, and completely unaware that her world was about to implode. Our eyes met across the room, and she gave me a warm wave. The naive little homewrecker actually thought we were friends. "I should go say hello to some of the newer employees," I told David. "Make them feel welcome." I made my way through the crowd, greeting clients and colleagues with the practiced charm of a woman who'd attended dozens of these events. But I was watching the clock. The packages had been delivered at 3 p.m. People checked their mail after work. Soon, the recipients would start making calls. "Eleanor!" Lily approached with a brilliant smile. "You look absolutely stunning. David's such a lucky man." "Thank you, sweetheart. You look lovely too." I embraced her lightly, noting the expensive perfume she wore, the same vanilla and jasmine scent I'd smelled on David's clothes. "That dress is gorgeous." "New?" A faint blush coloured her cheeks. "A little splurge. I figured this was an important evening." Important indeed. She thought tonight would mark the beginning of her new life with my husband. Instead, it would be her professional funeral. At 7:30 p.m, James Harrison, the firm's senior partner, received a phone call that made his face go ashen. I watched from across the room as he stepped away from his conversation with the mayor, his phone pressed tightly to his ear. 5 minutes later, Margaret Peterson from the City Planning Commission received a similar call. Then, Robert Chen, one of the firm's biggest clients. The ripple effect was beginning. David was deep in conversation with potential investors when his phone buzzed. He glanced at it, frowned, then excused himself. I followed discreetly, staying just close enough to hear his side of the conversation. "Mom, slow down," he said, stepping into an alcove. "What packages? What are you talking about?" I smiled. David's mother, Margaret Morrison, had always disapproved of me, but she despised infidelity even more. The evidence I'd sent her included particularly damning photos of David and Lily, along with a detailed timeline of their affair. "I don't know what you're talking about," David continued, but his voice had taken on a panicked edge. "There must be some mistake." By 8 p.m, the party's atmosphere had shifted. Small groups huddled together, whispering urgently. Phones buzzed constantly. James Harrison looked like a man watching his reputation crumble in real time. Lily noticed the change too. "Is everything okay?" she asked, appearing at my elbow. "People seem tense." "Office politics," I said dismissively. "You know how these things can spiral." She nodded, but I could see the worry in her eyes. Her instincts were good. She sensed danger even if she couldn't identify its source. At 8:15 p.m, James Harrison took the stage to make what should have been a cheerful holiday toast. Instead, his face was grim. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice carrying across the suddenly quiet ballroom, I'm afraid I have some unfortunate news that requires immediate attention. The crowd stilled. David appeared beside me, his face pale with confusion. It has come to our attention, Harrison continued, that certain employees have violated our company's ethical standards and professional conduct policies. Effective immediately, we will be conducting a full investigation into these allegations. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Lily grabbed my arm, her nails digging into my skin. "What's he talking about?" she whispered. I didn't answer. I was watching David's face as understanding dawned. His phone had been buzzing non-stop, and I could see him putting the pieces together. Harrison cleared his throat. "David Morrison, please see me in the manager's office immediately." The crowd parted as David walked toward the exit, his shoulders rigid with barely contained panic. Every eye in the room followed him, and I could see the whispered speculation beginning. "Eleanor," Lily's voice was shaking now, "what's happening?" I turned to face her fully, letting my mask slip just enough for her to see the cold satisfaction in my eyes. "Justice," I said simply. Before she could respond, Harrison called out again. "Lily Chen, you're also needed in the office." The colour drained from Lily's face. She looked at me with dawning horror, finally understanding that this was no coincidence. "You," she breathed, "you knew." "I knew everything," I said softly, my voice barely audible over the crowd's murmurs. "I knew about Denver. I knew about Phoenix. I knew about Portland. Did you really think you could run the same con in every city without someone eventually connecting the dots?" Lily's composure cracked completely. "You don't understand. I love him. This isn't what you think." "Love?" I laughed, the sound sharp as breaking glass. "You mean you love his bank account, his connections, his ability to advance your pathetic excuse for a career? That's not true, isn't it? Tell me, Lily, how much of David's money have you spent on clothes, dinners, and rent payments? How many times have you played the struggling artist while bleeding him dry?" Her silence was answer enough. "Here's what's going to happen," I continued, my voice dropping to a whisper. "You're going to walk into that office, and you're going to discover that everyone knows exactly what you are. Harrison has copies of your employment history, including the harassment charges from Denver and the real reason you left your previous jobs." Lily's eyes filled with tears, but I wasn't finished. "David's business partners have seen every text message, every photo, every receipt from your romantic dinners. His mother knows he's been cheating on his wife with a woman who's made a career of destroying marriages. And your mother, well, she's discovered that while you've been begging for money because you're supposedly broke, you've actually been living quite comfortably on another woman's husband's dime." "You're insane," Lily whispered, but there was no fight left in her voice. "I am thorough," I corrected, "and I'm done being a victim." Across the room, I could see security guards taking positions near the exits. Harrison wasn't just investigating. He was preparing for damage control. A firm like his couldn't afford to be associated with a scandal involving predatory employees and extramarital affairs with clients watching. "Elena, please," Lily tried one last desperate appeal. "I'll leave. I'll transfer to another city. Just, please, don't destroy us like this." I studied her face, seeing the calculating woman behind the tears. Even now, she was trying to manipulate me to find an angle that would save her. "You should have thought about that before you decided to steal my husband while I was dying in a hospital bed." Her eyes widened. "What are you talking about? You were never in another life," I said, my voice carrying a finality that made her step back. "In another life, you got everything you wanted. David left me alone to die while he held your hand and promised you the world. You won." I leaned closer, my voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "But that life is over, and in this one, I always win." Lily Chen walked toward the office like a woman heading to her execution. She was right to be afraid. David emerged 20 minutes later, his face a mask of devastation. He'd been terminated, effective immediately. His partnership was dissolved. His reputation in the architectural community was destroyed. The man who'd abandoned his dying wife for a younger woman was now unemployed, disgraced, and facing potential legal action. He found me by the coat check, retrieving my wrap with calm efficiency. "Eleanor," he said, his voice broken, "I can explain." I turned to face him one last time, this man who'd been my husband, my betrayer, my victim. "David," I said gently, my voice carrying all the love I'd once felt and all the knowledge I'd gained. "I don't need you to explain anything. I already know everything." I walked toward the exit, my head held high, leaving behind the wreckage of their affair and the ruins of their careers. Behind me, I heard David call my name one more time, but I didn't turn around. I had finally forgotten him already. Outside, the December air was crisp and clean, full of possibility. Somewhere in the city, divorce papers were being prepared. Somewhere else, two people who'd destroyed my life were discovering what it felt like to lose everything. I smiled as I walked toward my car, towards my new beginning, toward a future where I would never again be anyone's victim. Death, I'd learned, was an excellent teacher, and revenge, it turned out, was the sweetest kind of rebirth.